Hey, everybody, we are back again. Ray and I are back with Ashley, and we are here to talk to you about dogs, babies, and children. So we're just going to jump in and get started. Ashley, when it comes to, couples starting a family, when should they reach out about training for their dog?
Yeah, I think this is something that people kind of wait until after the fact, without realizing how much of an impact a new child brings to their life. Training really should start before the baby even arrives. If you're thinking about planning and starting that family, or a little bundle of joy just happens to pop up, that's definitely the time to really start thinking about how is my dog? It doesn't even have to be, it has behavioral issues like resource guarding or aggression, right? Like little behavioral issues, is the dog loud and pushy? Does it like to just jump on and off the couch and run around in circles in the house? Those are behaviors that it's fine now, but how are you going to feel when you're nursing a baby on the couch and here comes the dog jumping on and off, or the baby's trying to take a nap and now it's barking at the door and it won't stop? So I think sometimes people are like, well, my dog's a good dog. And I don't doubt that. But also, how many behaviors does it have that when a baby comes, is it going to be annoying? And then another thing that people don't consider is you're adjusting to a brand new lifestyle. Your dog is kind of going to get put on the back burner for a little bit while you adjust to, waking up in the middle of the night to change diapers or feed the baby, or it's just, cranky and fussy. uh, Trying to schedule, lessons in there, or, you do a board and train program, but there's still homework to be done on the tail end of it. Is it going to be easier for you to juggle that and a newborn, or is it a little bit better to do it beforehand, get into that routine, and then that way it's already established and it's second nature for them?
Yeah, the proactiveness is huge. As a matter of fact, I remember when Ray and I were still taking clients, and one of my favorite ones was when the family called us before, and we literally did sessions walking the dog with the buggy, or the stroller and whatnot. It's all these things in your life that you sort of take for granted as just like you'll do them, but your dog doesn't understand. It needs to see those pictures in order to learn. So what do you think about, families who may have not gotten training beforehand, and the baby's here? So what would your advice be to couples who, oh my God, I've got this new bundle of joy, my dog is not happy. What do we do then?
Yeah, my biggest piece of advice for that is, the baby and your dog, they don't have to interact. I think there's a lot of pressure put on people. They see the cute videos and photos online of the baby snuggled up with the dog. And I mean, that's dangerous for any dog and any baby to be in that situation, but especially if there's behavioral issues. There just shouldn't be that pressure. Like, they just don't need to see each other. Dogs have a really great sense of smell, and we went over that in one of our previous trainer talks about, the people that want to shove their hand in dogs' faces to be like, hi, like, you can smell me. I have dogs at home. They smelt you, half a mile back. So they understand that this baby is in the home. They you, just little things, like especially for the dog, establishing a routine. I think one thing that parents feel really guilty about is like how much time they're spending with the baby and not necessarily with their dog anymore. So get into a routine of like, okay, so the baby goes down for a nap. Now's the time that I'm gonna like snuggle with my dog, and that's the time that I get to give him undivided attention, right?
So when we're talking about, I hear this all the time. We've got that, like, especially with pit bulls, like the nanny breeds, right? So dogs that'll protect the baby. Um, Talk to me a little bit about when you hear somebody say that dog is really protective of a baby. What comes to mind for you?
So the reality is, and this is my controversial hot take, any dog, any breed can be a nanny dog if you are a negligent parent. There is no dog being bred to watch a baby, nor should they. That's why the parents are here and why human nannies exist. A lot of the times, protection, people think that like, oh, my dog just loves this baby, right? And it's the same thing as, when they're like, oh, like he really loves me and protects me, so like no one can even shake my hand. Like that's not protection, right? Like that's just resource guarding behavior. It's a dog that's insecure. And especially if they're seeing that baby as a prey item and you're getting near it and it's growling at you and it's trying to possess that baby, you're setting both the dog and that baby up for failure. It's going to lead to a bite, whether it's to whoever's trying to grab the baby or the baby itself. And it's just a very dangerous position to be in.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many calls we've gotten from, owners of like healer type dogs, blue healers and stuff like that. And they always say, my kid was running around and he came up and bit him in the butt. Like, what does that sound like to you? So their natural instincts are kicking in, they're hurting. So break it down for me. If you go to a client's home and the dog's exhibiting some behavioral problems, whether that's nipping at the baby or barking or being possessive, how do we roll everything back with the baby in the house? I mean, really break that down for us.
Yeah, it's just about establishing just rules, boundaries, structures. I've really never met a dog with behavioral issues when there's structures and leadership in place, right? So this dog doesn't get to just have free access to everything. It needs to be taught, impulse control, a place command. It needs to be crate trained. Again, having like a predictable routine for that dog is really going to help it. Just be like, okay, like it's this time of the day. I just ate my breakfast and now I'm going to go lay down while, the baby's nursing. Things like that, just to make it so, everyone's where they're supposed to be.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So let's tell people so now we know what should happen with the structure and the rules and the boundaries. What should they be looking for with the dog as far as body language, sign and signals that, hey, maybe there's some trouble brewing with that dog and the baby?
Yeah. And so whenever I talk about body language, like I have to stress that it's very nuanced. So there are certain behaviors that I'll say could be stress signals or could just be something completely unrelated. But the biggest things to look for, is your dog tense? Is it looking at that baby and it's stiffening, its ears are pinned back, its eyes are wide, it's licking its lips, just everything about it looks uncomfortable. It's probably feeling a little bit iffy. Or, on the other side of the spectrum, you have a dog that's pretty prey driven, right? And that baby is, making high pitched screaming noises and making unpredictable movements. And then that dog is kind of just, posturing up a little bit, like really honing in on it. Okay, now we're seeing some predatory behaviors there. If you have a dog that, you look at its body language every day and it's loose and wiggly and just happy. And now all of a sudden it's tight lipped and it's just yawning and just being kind of weird. It's probably showing a lot of stress signs. There's probably some trouble brewing there.
Yeah, a lot of the times it's just exposure for the dog too. Like if they've never been around these little humans and the sounds they make and the smells and everything else, and they pick up on the stress of the parents too. If the parents are stressed out from not sleeping and they don't have the tolerance for the dog to be doing some behaviors they probably should have addressed prior to the baby showing up, you've got the perfect storm brewing right there. And the dog has to be in a position that it has to make some decisions on its own. And the dogs, they're terrible decision makers, and especially around children. The other thing you got to consider is, when the children get a little bit older, they're going to bring their friends over. So now you've got a whole nother can of worms. So you've got all these other kids in the house. And I think the number one thing that we really have to stress here is it's on the parents to control the environment. No dog should be like free roaming with these small children until, you have a abundance of experience around that. And that what the dog's behavior is all about. So I think that's something we need to make really clear. And there are 1%ers out there. There's some dogs that just don't like children. They just, no matter what you do, it becomes a management issue and they have to be kept apart. And that is heartbreaking for some people, but that's reality. So, when we talked about thresholds and certain dogs will show you those thresholds and you got to respect them, good news or bad news, but that is something that you have to take into account because that dog will typically only get one strike around children. And ultimately, it's not the dog's fault. It's usually the owners that haven't taken the precautions in advance to set the dog up for success. Have you come across situations like that with all your clients that you've been in front of?
Thankfully, most of my clients with children have either done a board and train or a hybrid program before the child has arrived. So I've been very lucky that I haven't had to personally deal with situations where there's been a bite. to a kid. I, however, was the kid that got bit. I think there's a lot of, old-headed beliefs, right, of just a dog's a dog and the baby's the baby. I think I was in 4th grade. I'm not sure how old 4th graders are, so like 8 or 9 again. We really didn't understand what resource guarding was. So we had a little toy poodle that resource guarded my mom. And so she was sitting on the couch, little poodle's on her lap. And I sat down next to her and I looked at that dog and it looked at me and it bit me right in the face. So I had to get 4 stitches in my lip right here. And this little dimple is actually where the canine punctured my face. And that was the one strike for that dog again. And I mean, I love my parents more than anything, but they were not good dog owners when we were growing up. We didn't understand these things. These kind of resources weren't available to my family. So we didn't really understand that when we got near my mom and the dog is starting to act a little shifty, he's getting ready, and dogs are tolerant until they're not, right? So it was just that one time, one too many of me being near our mom, and he was like, okay, well, you didn't listen to me the first time, so now I'm gonna take matters into my own hand. And you have to think too, from the dog's perspective, how many things do kids like to do that dogs don't like? A dog or kids, they love to hug and kiss and grab and pull, play dress up, ride the dog, right? All these things. And so if the, parent's not really paying attention, or if they're kind of seeing it and they're like, oh, like the dog is fine, like he's not doing anything. Again, dogs are tolerant until they're not.
Yeah, it's funny because I actually saw, I'm not gonna lie, it was cute, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, this is just a bad idea. It was a video on Instagram of a dog getting its nails painted by a little girl. It was adorable, and the dog wasn't showing any distress signs. That's why I thought it was adorable. But I think it's always better to err on the side of caution and not put the dog and the child in that situation. So let's talk to people about some safety tips or safety advice. Say they didn't get the training. What are some things that they can do with the kids now to avoid the situation that you had when you were a child?
Starting from infancy, right? One rule that I like to implement for my new parents, one loose at a time. So as that baby's starting to get mobile and they're crawling around, again, a really weird thing for dogs to see. There's a little human just zooming around the house now. If the baby's loose, okay, well then the dog's in the crate or the dog's in the other room or outside. And then, if the baby's in a high chair or down for a nap, then the dog gets to be loose. Again, he's smelling them. They know the baby's there. You don't need to risk that interaction, especially as, the baby, like accidents can happen in a split second, even if you are observing them. I did hear of a story where I think parents were in the room, young child was in the room, and I think the dog went for a ball that had just fallen near the child. But because the child was there and in the way, he wasn't being aggressive, but he grabbed the child by accident. And I mean, the parents were supervising, but again, it can happen in a split second. So I think parents really need to weigh, the pro and cons of, do you want to put your child in harm's way? And then as they say, oh, did you have something to say?
No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So and as kids get older, right, really teaching them the importance of just rules and boundaries around the dog. The dog's eating, the dog's sleeping, it has a toy, it has anything that it might be like a little possessive of, right? Just go ahead and leave the dog alone. We don't hit the dog. We don't yank on the dog. One thing I like to do, and I even do this with like the newly rescued dog that might have some weird, fearful issues, the pet pause rule, pet the dog twice or for 2 seconds and then pause. If the dog wants to re-engage with you, cool, then you can continue petting it. But if he kind of just walks away or, he's kind of be like, I don't know how I feel about this interaction, just leave him alone. At that point, like he's saying, he doesn't want this interaction right now. Some dogs can be a little conflicted where they're like, oh, sure, maybe you can pet me. I don't want any conflict. But deep down, they're kind of feeling some type of way about it. And then teaching the one hand rule too. 2 hands, they're going to try and grab and get a little bit rougher with the dog, but just 1 hand, gentle strokes. Don't loom over the head, right? Just go like kind of on the chest or on the back. Teaching kids from a young age just how to be gentle with dogs and not allowing them to escalate to rough play.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes the accidents that happen are not nefarious. I mean, you've got a big goofy lab running through the house and knocks the kids in the coffee table or something like that. So again, you have to control the energy around the child and the child around the dog. So if they're getting too riled up, then the playtime or the session around each other is over. So I think that's the thing that parents need to really understand. Whenever our trainers, interact with couples that have, a kid on the way or have a kid on the ground, and you've got a dog in the house, the first thing they're doing is they're going through the set of house rules. I mean, I think that has to be abundantly clear, and it has to be enforced by everybody in the house. And it's for the safety of the dog, the child, and everybody else around. And that's what, I guess, the importance that needs to be stressed. I guess the king command here that you want to get to would be the place command, because that's called the ultimate one to kind of test the dog's impulse control and stuff like that. But could you talk to me about, I guess, the bubble you want to create around the place command, and how to explain that to children and the parents, and to what it means for the dog?
Yeah, I always condition the place command as well as the crate. It's just a place where the dog can go to relax. And even with my board and train clients that don't have kids, I mean, I tell them the same thing. If your dog's there and he's relaxing, leave him alone. The more that you go over there and you're petting him and you're like, oh, like, what a good boy. Oh, I love that you're there. The more you're just riling him up, right? He's getting over aroused. That's no longer a spot where he can go relax. He's going there and he's already like, oh, I'm a good boy. You're going to come over here and pet me. And so same thing with kids, right? I mean, first of all, don't allow your kids to climb all over your dogs. But also, if, the dog's laying there relaxing, your kid's going over and they're like, oh, hi, Fluffy. And they're just petting them. Dog can't, just take a nap or chill out. So I tell all my clients, I'm like, that's their island. Just leave them alone while they're there. When they're calm, when they're relaxed, then they can come join the family again. And it's really about just, teaching dogs that, yeah, you can have affection and you can have time with us and play with us, right? But you have to be in the right mindset to do it. So if you're coming out of the crate or coming in from, outside going potty and you're bouncing off the walls, you don't get affection from me. And then you don't get to go play with the kids either, because you're already way too worked up. And when they're worked up like that, it's going to be so much harder to then try to be like, oh, Fluffy, stop doing what you're doing, because they're already in such a heightened mind state. So go ahead, just let them calm down, collect themselves, and then they can join the family, and then they can get that affection.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too, you used to make a game out of it. When you walk in the house and you don't want the dog mobbing the kid with, as they come in the door and stuff like that. Tell the kid outside, hey, make a game. Don't look at him. Don't touch him. The first one who does is losing the game, whatever the deal is. You turn it into something like that. And just enough time for that dog to settle out, and then you ask him to do something with sit or down or something, and then if they want to interact, go for it. I think you just turn it into a game and turn it into terms that the kids can pick up on and get on board with. That's cool. The other thing I think is really important is advocating for the dog that you have. You can't train dogs to bite people and be surprised when they do. So, when you got protection dogs, a lot of people like to talk about, I want a dog to protect me. Well, you got to really think through what that means, because if you're going to spend your whole life training this dog that every person they see is a potential threat, we got the boogeyman around every corner. When you do that's kind of irresponsible bite training, then you're inviting problems, not only from children, from anybody, because everyone becomes a potential threat. Dogs hyper aware. With people who have these types of dogs, what do you tell them? I mean, that, how do you undo that if they've been doing that for years, and then now they're bringing a child in the home? How do we deal with that situation?
I think that's one of those things that it's very dependent on the dog and the type of training, right? There's definitely those anomalies, like super stable dogs, right? Where, they've been doing the PPD stuff and it works for them. I see plenty of people in PSA, plenty of mothers who they're out on that training field with the baby strapped to their chest and, they're working with their dog. But those are Those are people who understand their dogs and don't force those interactions. When you have the average pet owner who might have a dog that is, the Cane Corso from Craigslist that's been doing backyard bite work with Joe Schmo from the town over, right? And that dog is pretty insecure and everything is a threat and he's pretty defensive. Again, baby does not have to interact with this dog. That dog does not have to like your kid ever. And again, it's about having those safe places in mind and having that structure and those rules. So, as the kid gets older, the dog doesn't adapt, the dog doesn't like them, that's fine. It can be out on place. It can go in the crate or, things like that. It can be muzzled, little safety precautions. But again, it's the forced interaction is where those things are going to go wrong. And I've had that talk with my husband too, when we're like, do we want to start a family? I'm like, I can't bring a baby in here with a dog that we have. We're just going to eat the baby. We can't do that. So like, it's being realistic about the dog that you have in front of you. And when we talk about genetics, again, like a trainer can only do so much with genetics and what that dog is bred to do or who that dog is. We can't train it out. We can manage those behaviors. But if you have that high prey drive dog and you think it's going to go after that baby, you better have those safety measures in place, and that better be a very obedient dog. Or, like in our circumstance, we just won't have a baby. Like, that's fine. I like my dog better.
I'm laughing. All of that was such a good point. Ray and I used to have a dog, our old dog Nero, who was protection dog, and he was a great working dog, but he was so good with children. Actually, one of my favorite photos is when he met this little girl. I don't know, Ray, if you remember, we were at the farmer's market and he met this little girl and it was adorable, but he was an anomaly. My other dog that I have now doesn't like children. It's just the energy that he doesn't like. So we're talking a lot about, managing the environment, keeping kids away from dogs for safety, but there are children that are really great little dog trainers, as they get older, 9, 10, 11, 12, they're really good with dogs. I know we used to get some kids involved. So let's talk a little bit about when it's safe to get a child involved and how to do that, given, let's assume that the dog is okay with children.
Yeah, I think when kids are kind of young and they're already picking up responsibilities in the house, like they're helping put away dishes or clean up their room, they're showing that they are capable. One thing that I like to do with kids that do want to be involved is the 2-leash rule. So, there's 2 leashes on the dog, the owner's in positive control, but that way the kid is like, oh, I'm also walking Fluffy. But if something were to happen, the dog pulls, it sees a car or something, there's always an adult in control of the situation. But it's still like those little gradual exposures to like, oh, I'm helping with the dog. Typically, if the dog is okay, like there's no resource guarding issues, helping with the food. If you think the dog might be a little bit weird about the food bowl, stay away from things like that. But like if the kid is showing, responsibility, like, oh, go help pick up in the yard, things like that. Teaching just like the full responsibility of what comes with dog ownership too, right? It's not just like the fun throwing the ball at the park kind of stuff.
I love that. Yes. Use the children to pick up the poop. That's a great thing. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but the dog owners that feel guilty, they add a dog into the mix or a baby into the mix, and now they feel like they're not spending enough time with their dog. Talk a little bit about, that, why not to feel guilty and how we can build a new routine, I suppose.
Yeah, and again, and I think that's why it's super important to work with a trainer before the baby even arrives. Because if you establish a new routine, can you go away, please? If you establish a new routine before the baby even arrives, like now it's kind of ingrained into the dog, right? Like, okay, like there's going to be times where I can't follow mom around all day. I'm going to have time in the crate or on place. It's going to be a lot easier for that dog to adjust. But even if, things happen, right? The baby comes, didn't really establish a new routine, that's fine. But, just implementing those things throughout the day, Again, things like the baby goes down for a nap and like, okay, now that's the time that you get to come up on the couch and snuggle with me, right? And just doing little things like mental enrichment. If you think your dog is getting really bored because now you can't go on walks as much, things like, like a puzzle toy or a lick mat. I like to play like hide and seek or scent games where you hide treats throughout the house. Like get the dog to use their nose, use their brain. It'll kind of tire them a little bit out, or tire them out more than just, farting around in the backyard and digging holes, right? And then there's also like a lot of alternatives to walks too, if it makes it easier for owners. Sometimes it's hard to get out with babies, but there's treadmills. You can get like flirt poles or tie like a tug up to a tree on a bungee line, right? If your dog likes to play tug like that. And then there's sniff spots too, where you can just rent a private field and just let your dog rip for an hour. And I've seen some where they go through nature trails and things, and it's like $20 an hour. But that way, you can still, it's all like fenced in, so you can just push, the baby in the stroller, but your dog gets to have some freedom, stretch its legs, and you're still having that time with them. But like everyone's kind of involved.
So just to kind of summarize here, I think we've touched on, in a perfect world, we would want that structure already in place and have some really good obedience, including rock solid place command, recall, and have the appropriate tools available to that dog in case we need them. Are there any other tips that you would advise any new parents to be, that already have a dog in the house, other than get training before the child arrives? But what other tips could you throw out there for them?
Yeah, I think it's just about being really realistic of what, kind of problems are there and what we can actually work on solving. I think sometimes it's like, oh no, my perfect fluffy, like that's fine, until it becomes a big issue, right? Again, like little things like the barking at the door, or, they're not super tolerant of guests coming in, but say you're sick and the kid's sick, so you want your mother-in-law to come over and help you, right? How are you going to do that if Fluffy's guarding the door and won't let anyone in? So little things like just identifying like what's working, what's not. And then that's going to really be able to help your trainer establish a plan. Sometimes we get people who are just like, well, we have a baby, the dog's out of control, but they don't really give us anything to work off of, right? So like, yeah, I can give you really vague terms and a vague training plan, but for you, your lifestyle, what's going to work? Because if I give you tips that you're not going to implement, like you don't have the time of the day or whatever it may be, is it really going to be helpful for you?
Yeah, considering most dogs, when you're talking about bite scenarios, get one strike, you really have to take this seriously. So really, even the smaller problems, like you mentioned before, need to be addressed prior to a baby coming into the picture, to really have that peace of mind that this is going to go well. So I hope people just take heed and don't ignore the little stuff, because the little stuff becomes big stuff really quickly. And we don't want to put a dog in a position where it could end up in a scenario that the dog injures a child and gets put to sleep for it. And it's not fair, because you allow that behavior to kind of fester prior to bringing that baby home. And I think that's what could be avoided in almost 99% of the incidents that I've come across. So that's just something I hope most people would take heed on. And but these are some really good points and really good tips wrapped up into one. Bridget, did you have anything else?
I think one other question, again, perfect world scenario. Someone finds out they're pregnant. When do you advise them to get training?
As soon as possible, as soon as just feasible. Establish that routine now, before you're just overwhelmed with the parenthood life. And again, it's going to be that easier transition for your dog. Don't let your dog get so stressed out after the fact, and now you're juggling the baby, the dog that's stressed, and trying to make it all work. You're going to just start trying to cram that square block into the circle hole.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Because ideally, especially if they put the dog into a board and train, we have at least 2 follow-up sessions for them to do. And so you're considering about a month post board and train just for the the human learning part of the process. So try to be proactive out there if you guys are expecting children. But yeah, like Ray said, I think we gave everybody a lot of really great information. We did touch on some posts. I encourage everybody who's watching this to go back and watch all of Ashley's videos, because a lot of what we talked about here is also referenced in those videos. And we have a section on our YouTube channel where you can easily look up her videos. Ashley also talked about nose work. We have a really great nose work video with our trainer, Rich. Also, you can easily search for that under the different subtopics for our trainers on our YouTube channel. But if you or anyone you know are expecting a baby, or you just want to get your dog trained, give us a call. KoruCanine.com, all the social platforms at Koru Canine, and we will be back again very soon.